Good evening, everybody. I'm Melissa Davis, Senior Marketing Officer for Alcohol Beverage Services, and I want to thank you for joining us for our October virtual seminar. Let's see, we still have some people joining, getting settled, pouring themselves a little Uncle Nearest. So in the interim, just a couple quick reminders. So recording of this session has already started. So we're going to post this on the website for anyone that could not join us live. And then because we're expecting a decent crowd tonight, everyone's line is going to be muted. We'll use the chat box for questions. And then last but not least, be sure to follow ABS on Facebook at ABS Montgomery County and Twitter at ABS MoCo, or sign up for our weekly e-newsletters for sales specials, lottery information, community news. And then let me do just a quick check real quick. We've got some more people joining us, but I think we've got a decent crowd that we can go ahead and get started and catch them up if they miss a little bit here or there. So let's see. So tonight, we're super excited. Our seminar is going to be with Uncle Nearest, and we have two great folks from their company spending some time with us this evening. So Sherrie Moore, she's the Director of Whiskey Production, and we're super lucky to have her leading our seminar tonight. So welcome, Sherrie.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And then we've got Matt Aubrey. Matt is the Market Manager for DC and Maryland, and he is going to help me moderate tonight's seminar, moderate the chat, and then ask questions of Sherrie, intersperse those questions. So I just have to say, as someone who used to work for Jack Daniels, live out in bourbon country, I have been not so patiently waiting for the chance to learn more about your unique story, this moment especially given this moment in history, and just learning more about Nathan Nearest Green. So with that, without much further ado, I want to turn it over to Sherrie and Matt.
Well, I guess first, thanks for joining us. Melissa, thanks for having us. And then she said you guys are some real whiskey enthusiasts. So when Melissa reached out, I went to the source that makes it. So we're very lucky to have Miss Sherrie Moore, who's our Director of Whiskey Ops at Uncle Nearest, and she's going to tell you about the story. Any whiskey questions you can imagine, Sherrie probably has an answer for it. She's lived and breathed it. You've lived in Lynchburg your entire life, right?
Yes.
So, but yeah, so I'll turn it over to Sherrie. Like I said, like Melissa mentioned, any questions, the chat's open, and we'll pass them along to Sherrie, but I'll let her take it off.
Well, good evening, and thank you for having us. It's always an honor, and to be able to share the story of Uncle Nearest. I love the bottle, but it's even more fun when we've got whiskey nerds and I can really get into some of the things and open it up for questions. I'm going to start with just a little bit about me as I tell the story. As I started at Jack Daniels in 1975, I wish it was 85, I'm older than that. Started in 1975, I was 18. Then the drinking age was such that I could work there. I paid my way through college, working there, got a chemistry degree, and I ended up after college getting into QC. And with that department, I got into a lot of different areas. We were still small, we were growing, but we're small enough that I got into all the departments. And I only tell this because it's going to impact Uncle Nearest. Hopefully I'll contribute. But I was also working with people that had 30 years experience, but they had no formal education or training. But they knew the smell. They could tell me, this is the warehouse makes the sweetest whiskey, or, we've got a problem here. They could listen to a pump. So I was lucky to work with people with that much experience, and they just knew whiskey inside and out. I also got to work with research and development group and corporate. And so I also work with PhDs, and we did a lot of whiskey studies. One of the things that with Brown-Forman that is very unique is, and they may still, but at that time they still own their own cooperage, but they were only major brand that owned the cooperage. So we were able to get in and do a lot of testing of barrels. So one of the people I work with Lincoln Henderson. A lot of y'all know him. We started Angel's Envy. So we were testing, finishing barrels, worked with him. So I had a really, I kind of call it that outlier thing in the book with Malcolm Gladwell. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time and just get in. But I did put in my 10,000 hours. I worked, but I came in at a really good time. And some people ask me, well, was it hard being a woman in there? I was so nerdy and having so much fun. I never worried about being a woman in a man's world. I was just enjoying learning how to make whiskey. So that's a little bit about my background. And I ended up as director of whiskey operations at Jack Daniel's. So I had the distillery, charcoal mellowing, Lincoln County process portion of it, getting rid of the slop. I had all the warehousing and processing where we filtered the whiskey, environmental and the quality control and fire protection. So I ended up with a broad area. So I got to expose a lot. So this is the one thing that coming with Uncle Nearest, even though we're growing and we're going to be big, we're still kind of small, but we're coming in and putting in a lot of the principles from things that I learned at Jack Daniel's. One of the things when I was there, if you wanted to know how many wormholes was in a barrel in April 15th of 1985, I could pull that record up. So I'm already in that discipline of keeping up with data points. So we plan to do that. So that's a little bit about me. I had retired and was selling real estate because I didn't doing nothing wasn't going real well for me. So I got out there and was doing that. Well, I get a call from my cousin, and Jack Daniels didn't have any children, and then his nephew, Lem Motlow, started working for him. And Lem Motlow is my uncle. And so his granddaughter called me and she goes, there's some people in town researching the story of Uncle Nearest. And you've got to remember, Lynchburg is still a small town. So when folks from California come and they're doing research, word gets out. So my cousin found out they were here. And so she went over to introduce herself and offered to help them meet family members of Nearest Green, because the families have always been close. That relationship that Jack and Uncle Nearest had has just carried over through the years. So I don't know how many of you are aware how Keith and Fawn, they are the founders of the company. They're from California. And they had read an article in New York Times that came out in June of 2016. And the headline was something, enslaved man that taught Jack Daniels how to, or ex-slave taught Jack Daniels how to make whiskey. Well, they read the story, and that's when they planned to come to Lynchburg to research to see was the relationship during Fawn. She's a writer, and so she was wanting to write a book to see, was this relationship as special as what she felt like it was in that article in New York Times. So I met them the second day they were in Tennessee. And turned out that the farm where Jack and Uncle Nearest met, what we call the Dan Call farm, which is on our label, it was for sale. And I'm a real estate agent. So guess who showed them the farm? That was me. So and a little going back on history on the Dan Call farm and how it ties in. Dan Call was a Lutheran pastor that had a 300-acre farm. He had the distillery, and Uncle Nearest, he rented him. He didn't own him. He rented him to run the distillery. Well, Jack Daniels, when he was a young child, his mother died. His father remarried. He did not like his stepmother. He's the baby of the family, so he runs away from home at age 5. So he's at his uncle Felix Wagner's place. And Dan Call happens to come over and says, who's this little boy? And he said, well, it's my nephew, and he's run away from home and he's living here. And Dan Call says, well, let's just bring him and let him come over and stay with my wife and I, and we will teach him skills. Never thinking about the distillery, but they had a store and said he can help my wife at the store. So that's a little bit of how Uncle Nearest and Jack came to be on this farm here with his house, the Dan Call farm. So that is where he did help some at the store, but he was more drawn to the whiskey and the distillery. And he was still close with his brothers and sisters, but there was still a little bit of an orphan spirit about Jack. So I think Uncle Nearest didn't just teach him whiskey, but it was probably a father figure, and they had just a very special relationship. And Nearest Green, as you know, if you've read the article, heard anything about it, he's credited with, of course, being the first master distiller for Jack Daniel's. But he worked for Dan Call first and worked and perfected the Lincoln County process. And we'll talk about that a little later. And on this label, we've got 1856. And this year signifies the first year that during Fawn Weaver's research that she found that there was a recording of him being the master distiller. So that's why that is there. And so he is the first recorded master distiller, an African-American that was master distiller. So that's where the 1856 comes from. So they're on this farm, and I always like to tell this, and it's probably, I don't know if it's true, but it sure makes a good story, that evangelist Lady Love came into Lynchburg, and she was preaching a revival at Dan Call's church. And she came in on Sunday, and she said, by the end of this week, you're going to have to choose which spirit you're going to follow. If you're going to be the Holy Spirit, or you're going to keep making that whiskey. So by the end of the week, Dan Call felt convicted, and he sold the distillery to Jack Daniels at age 15. So that's how it went from Dan Call to Jack. So Jack stayed on that property. And so the first Jack Daniel distillery was on the Dan Call farm, and Uncle Nearest was there with him. He later purchased at the present site because his sales were going up and he needed more water. He wanted to get to a better water source or larger water source. So that's how it went from the Dan Call farm to where it is presently. And then Uncle Nearest and him, again, not only did they have this relationship with whiskey, there was just a bond between the two from all that we can gather. And then this bottle has 1884 on it. This appears to be the date that he did his last distillation, Uncle Nearest did. So we've got the 1856 that signifies, and I don't know if y'all have it, but we have a single barrel, and it's 1820. And that date is when we think that Nearest was born. And he was born in Maryland and then came to Tennessee. So that's a little backdrop of how Uncle Nearest and Jack came to the Dan Call farm. Well, when Keith and Fawn Weaver come to Lynchburg to research, turns out that the Dan Call farm is for sale. It had been passed through the family and had been sold in 1963 to a couple, last name's McGee, and they had decided to retire and sell the farm. So I showed, since I'm a real estate agent, that's how I got connected with them, showed them the farm. Third day they're in Tennessee, we write a contract and they purchased this historic piece of property. And the house is still there. They had to kind of redo it. And they've got that set up, but it is special that we've got that piece of property that has so much history. And that's where those two men were bonded. And when Jack moved, and a lot of times you'll see a picture, and it's the one that was in New York Times, and a lot of people think it is Uncle Nearest, but it's not. But Jack is sitting there, and his son George is right beside Jack, which just shows that they were probably more like brothers than employer and employee. But instead of sitting in the back, being in the back row, which could have been typical of that time, George was right there with Jack. So part of this whole thing started as a book, and then as Fawn is researching, it comes out that he deserves his own bottle. He needs his name. Jack has his name, Jim Beam has his name, so let's do Uncle Nearest. So that's how this went from a book, which if she slows down, she may finish her book. What do you think, Matt? I'm not sure. I don't know if she's going to slow down enough.
I don't think that word's in her vocabulary. She just never stops.
She does not stop. No. But we launched this whiskey in July of 2017. And during the conversations and when they, I helped them with buying the property, something was said, and I said, well, I retired from Jack Daniels. So when they decided to open, create this whiskey brand, I said, well, I will come out of retirement for this. Because, of course, I grew up in the community and, or my mother was from there, and I was there a lot during the summer. My great-grandmother was there. And my aunt, this had been Lynn Motlow's widow. She lived to be 96, so I was around her. So our families have always been close. I've always been with whiskey. I worked with Uncle Nearest, great-grandson, worked with others in the family, but I was really close with Buzz. So it's fun for me to come back and be part of letting this family that I've always loved get the recognition that they're relative, and then they're getting the recognition today. Little side note, my great-grandmother is Miss Mary Bobo. She has a boarding house in Lynchburg, and Jack Daniels ended up purchasing it. And so I feel like this is me playing it forward. I'm lucky that I've got a cookbook with my great-grandmother's picture on it. And my family didn't have enough money to do it, and Jack Daniels did it for us. So I feel like I'm helping with the Green family, getting their family in that recognition. So it's fun for me to be part of this.
And if you can ever get to Lynchburg, make sure you go have supper at Miss Mary Bobo's. It is the best fried chicken you ever have. And those apples.
I can cook a little bit like that. But boy, can I eat like that. I learned more about eating good than I did about cooking like that. So that's a little bit about the family, the connections with the family, and how the Weavers got this started. And of course, I'm honored to be part of this. And it's fun for me to come in and get back in the whiskey business and to be so closely connected with the Green family. So I will kind of get into the whiskey portion of this. Is we really have three things going on right now. This story, and if you ever get a chance to see an interview with Fawn, you'll see what we're talking about. She is passionate. She's a ball of energy, and there was no way she was going to wait 10 or 12 years before she launched this whiskey. So the first was securing some aged barrels. So we purchased aged barrels, and they're from Tennessee. We've signed an NDA. We can't tell you who it is, but it's not Jack, and it's over 8 years old, so you can guess. But we are got the barrels that we are purchasing. We also have a partner here in Tennessee that has a distillery, and they are distilling according to our mash bill, and so we already have some barrels aging. The third thing that we've got, and to me this is the most fun, we're in the process of designing our own distillery building. The Weavers have purchased a farm here in Shelbyville, Tennessee, and it's between Nashville and Lynchburg. So if you're going from Nashville to Lynchburg, you're going to drive by our place. It's a 270-acre horse farm. And I may be a little prejudiced because I grew up in this area, but they're the most beautiful horses, and just the farm and the fences and the horse barns here are just, I'm lucky to be here every day. I'm lucky to come out here. My office, which you can't see, was a horse stall, and I love it. Love having my horse stall. So we've got this 270 acres here, and we're already taken the old hay barn, and we have converted it, and we've got a bottling operation going. We've taken one of the horse barns, and it is already got horses back in it. We had to remove them for a while. We've got a trainer, so we've got probably 30 horses out here, 30 to 40 horses in the horse barn. We've taken one building and we've converted it, and this is where the offices are. Another horse barn, we're in the middle of getting ricks put in there for storing barrels. Then there was a large sale barn out here, and we're converting it into our visitor center. That will be where you come in and start the tours. And we're going to have a bar there. And now we're designing the distillery. We're going with an 18-inch continuous column. Of course, I know there's a lot of good things with pot stills, but I like a continuous column still. You can get a consistency with it. And, you know, my ideal thing, and it'll take us a little while to get there, is you start it and you run 24 hours a day. Because once you get that sweet spot, you just keep it. You know, you just stay and you keep monitoring. You go from one fermenter to another and you get this consistent product. Now, an 18-inch continuous column will produce about 12 to 13 barrels a day. Our mash bill is 84 corn, 8 rye, and 8 barley malt. And we will be sourcing our corn local, but more than likely we're going to head and get our rye and our barley malt from the north. I just think it grows better up there. I'm already talking with some people, and the other one is the controls at the large malt houses. They've just been doing this a while, so we will probably get that. And the rye that I think has the best flavor comes from a colder climate than in the South. But 84% of our mash bill is corn, and that will be local. One of the other things that we plan to do is work with farmers. So after you distill, you know, there's some fancy names, but down here we just call it slop. We got to get rid of the slop. So we've got several farmers that are ready to take that slop. One other thing about slop is kind of funny is I learned this when I was at Jack Daniel's, is it is such a good feed for the cattle, but it will turn the fat, because it's so high in corn, it can turn the fat yellow. So when a farmer is feeding the slop, he usually has to take it off the slop for the last 6 weeks so that that fat goes back to white so he can get the grading. It fattens them up, they get a little drunk, but it also turns their fat yellow, and you have to get them off that. So that's one of the things that we work on. And a little bit about our process. The barrels that on our aged whiskey that we have purchased, those barrels are a number 4 char, and the heads are a number 2. And we'll probably do more of a toast when we're able to do out here, more of a toast on the heads and the toast process on the barrel before we char, and we'll probably do a char 3. And I always say probably, and I want to be real careful on that one, because I think that our first maybe 10 years or 20 years is going to be a lot of R&D. I've already kind of got 2 cooperages lined up to where we can work on developing a proprietary toast level for the barrels and char, but we're going to have to just test those. And you don't just immediately know, you're going to have to let it age. So we'll be seeing what develops best in the warehouses that we're building. One other thing is on our distillery, we are going to do sour mash. So we'll be taking setback to put in a new fermenter, but we're not going to grow up our yeast. We've got somebody, we're working on that, is trying to come up with a wild yeast strain from the Dan Call farm. And then that we'll have them to grow our yeast for it, dry it, and that way it's in very controlled. And that's kind of the nerdy, but to really do your yeast, if you're growing up your yeast right, you almost need a microbiologist that's full time. And that's not something I think we're ready for. So we're going to let this firm in Kentucky handle that. So that we go through, and one of the big things that we're going to do, of course, is the Lincoln County process. So after the still, it'll go through the Lincoln County process. And some people call it charcoal mellowing. Jack, they used to call leaching. They're getting away from that. And I don't even like the sound of that, leaching. But one of the things that I've always kind of taken for granted, that process, because that's just what I grew up with, that's all I knew. But as we are designing our distillery, it's really seeing how important, how much a premium and an added step that is. Because instead of just coming off the still and going into the barrel, we're going to have anywhere from, you know, we'll just be learning as we go, but probably that whiskey will go through 10 feet of charcoal. We're looking at a vat that is about 10 foot deep and 6 foot wide. And it'll go through there, and it'll be 72 hours or plus as it travels through that. Then we're going to go in the barrel at 110 proof. And a little bit about Tennessee whiskey versus bourbon. Tennessee whiskey is bourbon, but we do an extra step. Now, it's not totally recognized by the TTB, but Tennessee itself put a law in place in 2013 that for a bottle to have Tennessee whiskey on it, it has to be distilled, aged, and go through the Lincoln County process in Tennessee. So we'll be doing that step. Now, I think I like what the Lincoln County process does. Always said it kind of lowers the fusel and some of these things. So if you're not mixing it with sugar, hopefully we've taken out some of the headache from you if you overindulge. But we will be going through the Lincoln County process, and you know, it's a whole different added building an area and process to this overall getting it in the barrel and getting it in the warehouse. Again, I think it is well worth it. I think it smooths it. I think it takes some of the grain notes so that when you go in the barrel, you've already removed some of the flavors. And, you know, and I kind of go back to the barrel. There's three things that the barrel does. It's going to remove flavors. It's going to add flavors. And the third one is there's an oxidation that goes on. So I think we get a little bit of head start because we've already got some of those undesirable flavors out when it goes in the barrel. And we could put whiskey in the barrel up to 125 proof. We've made the decision to go with 110. And that's the entry proof we'll have. And as I said earlier, we're going to be working on those char levels and toast levels. And I don't know how many of you are aware, but most barrels, bourbon barrels, were only charred till just maybe the last 20 years. And that's when we started doing more of a toasting level. And that was, Brown-Forman was one of the first ones to do that at Bluegrass Cooperage. And that started when they had bought a couple of wineries and decided to build their own cooperage. And as they were studying about toasting, we decided to see what does that technology do with barrels. And my theory is a lot of people that like the number 4, the one reason they wanted to go to a char 4, there's 4 levels of char, is really for more heat and getting some toast in there. So we've kind of separated that so that there'll be a toasting process, and then there is the char process. I think the toast does for the wood the same thing that it does for a piece of, especially sourdough bread, is you put that in the oven. Sourdough bread is good. You put it in the oven and just that little bit of toasting, you're going to have more of your sugars released. You're going to pick up extra flavors, and the same thing is true with toasting on a barrel. So I'm excited about including that in. we'll be aging. Our first warehouse is only going to be one floor, where it's a horse barn. It was just, so we're redoing that, and it's going to be a good place for us to age our single barrel, because you've just got a uniform temperature in there. All the barrels will age the same because it's one story. The next warehouse that we will be building will be your traditional 6-floor warehouse. We're going with brick style warehouses versus palletized. Am I talking too much? Y'all tell me to shut up.
Can I ask you a question about 1820 that somebody had? And I'll ask this selfishly for ABS as well. So someone was wondering when the next release of your 1820 is, and then I'm going to dovetail on that in terms of Matt or anybody know when we might be able to get some here in Montgomery County.
You want me to handle this one, Sherrie? This is my,
That's yours.
So as I was telling you earlier, Melissa, this year we have hit a very much uptick in demand, where we ran out of whiskey for a little bit. We got it back on the production line and we're going. Our 1820, out of all the barrels we get, 1% of those go to 1820. So as we've been trying to make sure we're fulfilling the order, we got an email yesterday. We projected to be an 85,000 case brand for the year of 2020, and we have sold 86,000 as of yesterday. So we're way above our projection, our forecast, thanks to our whiskey fans. But we're hoping, we're very much hoping that as production ramps up, we can set some of those aside. By maybe the beginning of the year, we can get 1820 for ABS. I don't want to, but there may be a place in DC that's getting it sooner. We're partnering up. We're partnering up for a charity drive for some to do a little charity to help people of color learn a little bit more about whiskey and whatnot. So keep your ears open. There may be a large whiskey bar where you might be able to buy some sooner than later.
I'm jealous already. I already know.
In Washington, D.C. But as of 1820, that's where we're at. That's as I go out and I see accounts and I talk to people, and especially people that know us and part of, as we say, our whiskey family now. They're like, when's 1820? When's 1820? But we'll hopefully by 2021, we'll have some. Maryland, D.C., MoCo has been a great market for us. I hope to get some more barrels in this area next year. But we'll definitely keep you up to date, and we'll definitely work with ABS to maybe get you guys
awesome.
We'll
thank
do
you.
something along that line. Yep.
I know you will. Before you start peppering Sherrie with a couple questions, I saw a couple come in, and I know, Sherrie, you want to start talking about smell and taste in those bottles. Oh gosh, it completely escapes me. I lost it completely. Oh well, you're gonna have to start asking questions, Matt. Sorry.
All right. Well, we got the first one was the 1820, so I handle that. The next one, Sherrie, was from Roger. Are we going to stay with a corn-based recipe like Jack, or venture into other mash bills?
I think we'll be trying other mash bills. I think our flagship will be mainly corn-based. And of course, to be bourbon, you're going to have to be, or Tennessee whiskey, you're going to have to be at least 51% corn. So we'll do that. But I think we will be doing different kind of testing and trying different things. But our story is so historical that I think we'll always be more of a traditional set of whiskey. You know, I don't see us with flavors, but to try rye, I think we will. I'm already calculating that if we ever want to try rye, that we will, because rye just does different than corn. So we're already allowing that in our pumps. So we are making allowances for that.
Yeah.
Now I saw the question about Jack and the distillation. I'll tell you on Jack, the yeast that Jack Daniel has a very distinct taste. And the way they do their yeast and they bring it up from jug. And, you know, there's people that don't like Jack, but you will almost always recognize Jack when you taste it because it has a very distinct yeast flavor.
Yeah, Brown-Forman in general is very, protective of not only the Jack Yeast, but Woodford and Old Forester. They go all out when the chemistry with the yeast to make sure the strain is always the same on all the whiskeys.
Yeah, yeah. And so watching that strain is big. And, you know, and it's one thing when you get with a brand like that, it's not about improving it. It's about keeping it consistent. Then you make your extensions. And so I think that's be very similar to us. I mean, I think we'll have a different taste profile, but I think we will have a very standard whiskey, flagship whiskey out there. Now, what I like about, this is the fun part to me of whiskey, is you can have the same yeast and the same mash bill here. And by the different barrel that we use, the place in the warehouse, how much you can do with that same mash bill. Because you know, you hear it different ways, but I think the barrel is probably over 50% of the flavor. I'm going to say at least 60, if not more. So the things that you do with the barrel. So I see our mash bill staying about the same on that one.
I know Fawn mentioned in one of her talks we do 2 different filtration processes after that. If you want to explain that to them. So
yeah, and I'm going to do one other little thing.
Oh, yeah,
I don't know if you'll get. I did my little experiment, and let's see, what do we intend to make? Oh yeah, I will have a totally different taste profile than Jack. I mean, it's going to be the historical process. You know, just like being Tennessee whiskey, it doesn't say how much charcoal you're going through. It just says it has to go through sugar maple charcoal. Well, we're going to do this to where there's going to be a pH difference between before it goes in and at the bottom. Where's going to be a taste difference. We're not just doing it to meet a regulation. We're actually going to be doing Lincoln County process on it. And before I get to filtration, one thing is, you know, water is so important. And Kentucky and Tennessee are known because of the limestone water. We're on that kind of that same shelf. One thing I learned that one in Kentucky and Scotland and Ireland are also on a limestone shelf. So it shows the importance of water. Well, one of the things that you hear on the water, if you see some ads, they'll say it's iron free. Well, of course, now with technology between DI units and now RO units, you can always take any water and get those minerals out. But at the time when Jack and them were making it, having that good water made a big difference. So on the iron free, and I took, before we started, I wanted to make sure this would work. I took some whiskey so Matt and Melissa can verify it was this color. Then I added a piece of rebar. It's some untreated iron. And this is what's happened in, 40 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
And if we leave it all day, it's going to get worse. But that is just an example of what iron does to whiskey. Iron, before it's aged, doesn't cause the color change. But aged whiskey, this is what happens. So they had to have whiskey in the 1800s. They had to have a water source so that when they dumped that whiskey and they were reducing the proof, that they didn't have this. So I do have a story though, and I'll try to tell it real fast. We dumped 100 barrels of whiskey. We went and pulled a sample out, and that whiskey was this color. We went to the barrel and we went through those 100 barrels, and somebody had put a nail in one barrel, and it probably just was out less than an inch in that barrel. It turned the one barrel so black that it discolored the other 99. So this is when the government was still on premise. So we're trying to figure out what are we going to do with this 100 barrels of cold black whiskey. And one of the old timers said, well, what they used to do is they pour milk in it and it would take it out. We're desperate. So God is my witness kind of statement. The government gave us approval. Probably wouldn't do that now, but they gave us approval. We added 20 gallons of milk, pasteurized milk that we bought at the grocery store. We added 20 gallons, filtered it, and we had to change the filter 5 times to go through. A filter that normally we would have done 20 batches through, we had to change it 5 times, but that whiskey came clear. But I love that an old timer and that people in the past had already figured out when they did have that problem, how to get the color out. So that's my iron-free story. But we've got the barrels, we've aged them, and when we dump them, one of the things that we do is we don't do chill filtration. We do activated carbon, and our carbon is from coconut shells. And we let that water, we reduce the proof, add the carbon, because that barrel has sit from anywhere. Traditional whiskey is going to be anywhere from 7 to 15 years old. So when you add that water, there's just a lot of reactions going. So we reduce the proof, add the carbon, and give it 24 to 48 hours. You can give it up to a week. And then we filter it through diatomaceous earth. And just a lot of fatty acids, a lot of things come out of that whiskey. And then it goes through the diatomaceous earth and it captures it. And we come out with a clear amber color whiskey that has a smoothness to it because of that filtration step. Now, if you ever, a lot of y'all may have seen haze at the bottom of a bottle. We tend to call that a chill haze, especially if something gets cold, it can get cloudy here. This filtration step not only smooths it, but it gives you more stability. You shouldn't have that show up in the marketplace. I feel like I've talked too long. Any more questions?
Well, I don't know who out there has some 56, but if you wanted to go ahead and taste it right now to see how smooth it is,
yes.
go right ahead.
Okay. I've got the 1884.
The only thing I have in my house right now is 1820.
Poor guy.
Just rub it in, Matt. Just rub it in.
Yeah. Now, our 1884 is 93 proof. Here is our 56, so you can see the color difference, the 56 darker. The 1884 is typically 7 to 8 years old, 93 proof, and won awards, just came out last year. Now, man, I love to smell whiskey, so I'm a sniffer. I'm a sniffer before I drink it. And need a little bit of water, a little particular.
The 1884 is very floral to me.
Yes, and I always get a little hint of caramel with it.
Yep.
But it's good. It is good. We've got one of the descendants is, with Uncle Nearest. Her name is Victoria Butler. And if you have a bottle, her signature is here on the back. So she is our master blender, and she curates these batches. We give her samples and she puts them together, and she's a natural. It comes down through the family. She's a natural. I mean, it has come and done well. But no, it's good. Now, our 56 is 100 proof. These barrels have aged a little longer. They're probably going to be 9 to at least 12, somewhere in that range. It may even go above, but it's probably going to be in that range. Now, to me, you've got very similar taste profile, but it's more complex. Like when I smell, when I taste, I'm getting just a little of this, and another time I get a little of that. But we've been able to blend and have a consistent product with this by choosing the barrels. But I always warn people, though, this is 100 proof.
Mm-hmm.
It could grow hair on your back, just.
But it don't taste like 100 proof.
Mm-mm.
You can.
But it can get you drunk like 100 proof.
It can get you drunk like 100 proof. That can do.
But I always want to warn people, but it is a smooth. And then, of course, the 1820, we're not tasting it, but I love a single barrel. I love single barrels because you can have this 2 barrels sitting in the warehouse right beside each other, same mash bill, entered on the same day, and they can taste completely different because of what went on in that wood during the toast, how old the wood had stayed in the rick yard before it was made into a barrel. And so single barrel, the 1820, when it does come, is just a fun product.
Yeah, the one I have is 110 proof. It's the US 12 barrel.
Okay.
And the one that is probably be in DC sooner than later is 115 proof. So and they also don't drink like 110.
No.
They are very smooth as well. As I told Melissa earlier, I'm born and raised in Kentucky. I had whiskey in a bottle, and I'm a Kentucky boy selling Tennessee whiskey, and 56 to me is really the smoothest 100 proof whiskey I've ever had.
Yeah.
And I tell people when I do tastings that after the story, we've told the story, Sherry's went in depth of how it's made, but I'm like, the story's really good, isn't it? And I go, I bet you're hoping the whiskey's as good as the story. And I was like, we can sell the whiskey by itself. Like that's how good I believe it is. Sherrie does a great job with making the whiskey, producing the whiskey, and
now the one thing that I think is that 1856, I want it neat or an old fashioned.
It makes the meanest old fashioned I've ever had.
Yes. Yeah, because I want a drink that's very whiskey forward because I don't want this lost.
Yeah.
I do not want this taste lost. This is just too good to lose with too much sugar.
Yep, exactly. The only other thing I mix it with is there's a cold brew liqueur out there currently, and I make what's called a cold fashion.
And
it's just a little bit of coffee, the coffee liqueur, and the whiskey. Gives you a little pickup, but it still comes through great. The cold brew is great in there, but that's the only an old fashioned. I'm with you. I'd rather drink it neat.
Yes.
And I'd be a quarter of the way bottle before I start feeling anything because I drank it so fast.
I get the question about when will our distilled barrels be in a bottle, and that's a hard one. I think we're going to have to just be testing it as we age. It's probably a year and a half or 2 years before we have our distilled whiskey in a barrel. And then we're just going to have to be tasting it and watching it on flavor development. Now, I will say that when we do get our warehouse, our first one that's multiple stories, I plan to maybe do 2 ricks, then go over to this side and do 2 ricks, and just stagger the barrels rather than filling up the first floor and then second floor, third floor, that I'll be distributing those barrels to where the building is still stable, but then we're getting that mix of floors. But we're still going to have to see, when does this mature? When is that taste profile what we're pleased with and that we're ready to go to market? So I'm going to say it's going to be 6 years to 11 years old, but I don't know just yet what that's going to be.
We got a question about who's our master distiller, and I don't know if you want to answer that.
Well,
I guess it's more you really, because we're sourcing right now.
Right, we're sourcing, and I'm designing this, but at the same time, just like today, I've been with somebody working on the safety program, and I was hands in deep at Jack Daniel's in production, and I will still be here. But our master distiller won't be worrying about safety programs. They won't be worrying about that. We're probably going to be raising up our own master distiller. It'll be somebody that we bring in. They're going to be learning it. I mean, I know how to do the fermenters and all that, but I will want somebody that lives and breathes in there, and I'll probably be training them. I hired Jack at Jack Daniel's. I hired Jeff Arnett, brought him up as master distiller. I worked with Jimmy Bedford, so I feel confident. But I've always been behind the scenes person more than out in the public. And
to touch on that master distiller, about a couple months ago, us with Jack Daniels started the Jack Nearest and Jack Initiative. And what that is doing is we have designed a program for people of color to advance themselves in the whiskey business, entrepreneurship, incubation, learning how to make a whiskey business. And then we also have a distiller program that is being ran. And luckily for me, the first enrolled person was actually a friend of mine from DC by the name of Tracy Franklin. She was a Glenfiddich ambassador for many years, and she is in the distillery program. So she will be learning how to distill, and then she may stay with us. She may go somewhere else, but she is. I'm sure Sherry's already spoke to her, because when I talked to Tracy, she couldn't wait to get to the technical stuff. Yeah. So, but it's when it comes to Uncle Nearest in this region, we have a lot of tie-ins right now with Nearest being born in Maryland, Tracy being the officially the first person in the Nearest Jack Initiative, and thanks to ABS and the fans of the whiskey for helping us grow so quickly in the past 2 years. I mean, I started in January, and it's been a heck of a year already, So, but that's the distiller question.
But I do think we'll be raising them up, whether it's Tracy and she tends to stay here or if she leaves, we'll probably be raising our own up here.
And I'm sorry, Sherrie. I was just going to remind folks to go ahead and throw their questions in the chat, because I want to make sure we get to everybody's question. And what I lost before in my brain, I wanted to go ahead and ask you. I had a couple folks reach out to me about photos, PowerPoint. They were very taken with your story, especially in terms of the new distillery that's coming. So anything that you could share, I know Matt's been racking his computer, but even if it's after the session, I'm more than happy to send that out to folks.
Yeah, we didn't have anything on the share drive, but if Sherrie has any pictures, she can probably share, or you could just Google the Nearest Green Distillery, and there's been pictures. And then also about a month ago, Al Roker from the Today Show was down, and he toured the distillery with Sherrie and Victoria and Fawn, and you can see some of the distillery on that interview. I think that's on YouTube as well. So, but
I didn't think to do those pictures. That's good. We need to start including that, because it's a beautiful facility. I had a consultant here today, and as we're going through, the horses came, they're in the stalls. I said, I know, everybody else takes a coffee break. I go outside my office and go pet horses. This is my relaxation. This is what I do at break time. So it's a very unique piece of property, and it's very pretty. So we can do that.
And Fawn is designing it very family friendly.
Yes.
So, they're going to encourage families to come down. One thing she's doing, when I went on the tour in January, she is in contact with the Guinness Book of World Records, because she wants to have the longest bar in the world there. So yeah, I told my wife the other day, I go, if you want something done, tell Fawn Weaver it can't be done. It usually gets done.
And to his point, one of the things is putting in a speakeasy here. Yep. I don't know if you call it a speakeasy, we're calling it, but it is where there's going to be non-alcoholic drinks, because we want it to be very family friendly. So if they're not comfortable going to the bar, there's going to be another place they can be in there with the kids. Mm-hmm. But 270 acres. It's a beautiful piece of property.
Oh yeah, it's gorgeous. And it was about a quarter done when I was there in January.
Yeah.
So
we've made progress.
Yeah, even during COVID, people kept working on it, so it's going. There's another question about my baseball cap. It is it is on the website along with some other ones. So just go to unclenearest.com, and we have a store, hats, t-shirts, sweatshirts, cigar cutters, anything you can think of. Also, there is if you are out of town, on vacation, you don't know where you can find some Uncle Nearest, there's a where to find us. Just type in the zip code you're at, and you get it. I got another question. a lot of sugar maple used for the barrels. Do you want to talk about that? And secondly, do you think we'll get more supplies out here in Maryland? So as I talked about, Maryland did get a very large order. The rest of the state, Montgomery County has had some, but Maryland got a very large order of 1856 today. So it will be available hopefully this weekend to people. We were out of stock for a while. Our apologies, but like I said, demand is going nuts for us. But Sherrie, if you want to talk about the sugar maple used for the barrels or the
okay, well, our barrels are white oak, so the barrels will be white oak. The sugar maple will be local. We plan to cut the first sugar maple from the Dan Call farm. There's plenty of those there, and so the sugar maple is for our Lincoln County process before it goes in the barrel, and then our barrels are made out of white oak.
This is actually the sugar maple. They sent us a nice little jar so we can show people that. So it goes right through that.
And it will get you dirty when you're working with it. I can tell you that.
I'm dirty now. The next question about the Uncle Nearest Silver. Why was it discontinued? That was before my time. I know. It was
a great idea, but we didn't do a lot of research and development on it and test that taste profile. So it was a taste profile that some people liked, and other people still thought it had more of a corn and grain taste than we wanted. It was, after it was distilled, it went through 3 times the Lincoln County process, 3 times it was filtered that way. And it was only in the barrel for 24 hours. We went up to 2 weeks, but it still did not take the corn taste out that Fawn liked. So we ended up going, it's very, very hard to get that corn out without aging it. Well, then once you start aging it, you have to take all the color out. So it was kind of a battle of, the corn is not coming out the way we wanted it to please it. But then once you start aging it, you hate to just strip all that good color
out. The next question, I know the answer to this one, but is sugar maple a requirement for the Lincoln County process in the same way new charred oak is required for bourbon? Actually, new charred oak is also required for us as well, right?
Yes.
It's an American whiskey thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or could we use different types of charcoal?
As far as I know, it is just the sugar maple.
But to be a Tennessee whiskey, it has to go through the Lincoln County process, which is the sugar maple charcoal filtering. And that is what Nearest came up with. That's he was the man that invented that. So the next question, when we get the Glencairn glasses back in stock, I didn't know we were out of stock, so I will reach out and see when it's coming. Yeah. I don't even have those. But we had some. Obviously, it's been a strange year, so there were some things we ran out of that we couldn't get reproduced quickly enough in the merch stores. So, but things are starting to normal out, so we should have those back in there. I would assume by the holidays. A lot of people.
I don't cover everything, but we were having weekend tours starting last September, but with COVID, we shut down in March. So I think that's one reason the retail, once we shut down our retail and tour center, we probably went, probably didn't keep our inventories as well up on the retail. And now that people are like ordering everything online rather than come and visit.
Yeah. Hopefully sooner than later, we'll have the distillery and tasting room back open for tours. It really is beautiful. If you ever get down to Shelbyville, I'll give Melissa my email. Feel free to reach out and I can call down and see when you're available. We love having visitors.
Oh, yes. I love showing around, chance to drink and pet horses and show you a piece of property I love. And you'll always have to be careful about me. When I talk about Jack Daniels, I say we. When I talk about this farm, I'm going to say we. And our whiskey, I'm going to say we. And my great-grandmother's, Miss Mary Bobo, I say we. But just to let y'all clarify, I have no money invested in any of these companies, but I still say we.
Yeah.
I have ownership. Yes, we want you to come see our farm.
Yes. It's they're sparing no expense. It's going to be quite when it's done, and it's going to be quite awesome. But yeah, if there's any other questions, comments, again, I can't thank you all enough. Melissa, thanks for having us. I know I love getting out and telling the story, and Sherrie loves telling the story, and Sherrie loves talking about whiskey, as you can tell. If you ever get down to the distillery and you see Sherrie out by one of the barrel rooms, pull her aside. You'll be there for an hour and a half.
Yeah, and I apologize. I'm so willing to do this, but I think y'all can tell I am a genuine operations person.
Yeah.
I am not a figurehead speaker.
Yeah.
I still say fixing, and I'm fixing to do this. So, but hopefully I've given y'all some information.
And it's thanks to you. As Fawn says, we're building a brand, something to outlast all of us. So thanks to you guys for supporting us, and helping us get there. We've in the past, since I started in January, Sherrie's been there since day one. I don't think she can imagine the growth that we've had.
Hey, I've only been on winning teams. Now I have to say I've only been on winning teams, so I'm not surprised. I knew we were going to be a winner.
And
I'm already looking out in year 2035 on how many warehouses we're going to need.
She wants to look up on that hill and see what Jack has, with just rick houses on top of rick houses. We definitely feel like this was all meant to be. I think if you ever hear Fawn talk, she talks about September 5th, and how a lot of coincidences seem to just fall right in place. Like Sherrie being a real estate agent, being one of the first people she met, and all that stuff. So one thing I wanted to talk about, you didn't talk at the distillery, that's kind of touching for me. Fawn is building a tasting room for when people come and pick barrels, and she's putting pictures of all of us on the wall, like all the people that have worked to build this brand. So I've worked a distributor before. So, in 200 years from now, I'll be the old guy on the wall. And that's kind of cool to me,
I'll be the oldest. I'm the oldest in the company. So I'll be the oldest when I'm,
Yeah. So to build a brand from to help build something so young into what we want it to be has been incredible so far. And I'm lucky to be a part of it.
I'm yapping now, but it's fun to be in an industry where getting old almost helps you, because there's no way to have 35 years experience and be 27.
Yep.
So it's some of the things that I've learned are still just as valuable. So yeah, this is the industry for growing old, and it's all going to happen to us. So I'm glad I'm here.
Yep.
I think there's a question for you on the event.
The 1820 event for in DC, it hasn't been officially announced yet, but keep an ear out for a certain large whiskey bar in DC. If you're in the area, you can probably figure out which whiskey bar I'm talking about. And if you do have any questions, if there's a store that you go to, not Montgomery County carries it all our stores, so thank you for that, Melissa. But if there's anything else, please feel free to reach out to me in an email. If my email is real simple. It's matt.aubrey, AUBREY, at Uncle Nearest. Anytime I can talk whiskey, meet our fans. If there's any events, you're having a reunion, something like that, and I can come and do a quick thing, I'm not opposed to that. So, but anything to tell the story Nearest and see more people that might not have got to taste our amazing whiskey that Sherrie helps create. Totally creates for the most part. So
I will just say, I can't thank you both enough. This was outstanding. And what you're doing to sort of pull along other people in the industry, the stories that you're telling, it's really outstanding and really commendable work. So, to yourself, Sherrie, to Matt, virtual cheers to you both.
Virtual cheers.
And then everyone that joined us tonight, thank you so much for spending a little time with us on a Thursday, and we hope to see you soon.
All right, take care. Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.